How do Black women benefit from being in community with Black men?
I ran across this video that reads, how do Black women benefit from being in community with Black men? Not romantically, not by blood, communally. And the fact that we are even having to have this conversation, to me, speaks to the anti-Black misandry that has been cultivated in this nation for decades upon decades now. Because if you have to ask why it's a benefit to be with somebody of your own community, like, to me, in my opinion, you're already starting off with the right footing, and that's showing you the value or the lack of value that they place on the individuals of that gender. So I want you guys to just keep that in the back of our mind. We're going to look at a video of a woman who was asking, what value do Black men bring to the Black community? If that was reframed, and if Black men went online and said, what value do Black women bring to the Black community, those men would be seen as misogynoir, and they would be shamed from here until tomorrow, and rightfully so. But because we are having this conversation from a Black woman, I'm just letting you know we're coming from that lens, and that is also, to me, an indication on how normalized anti-Black misandry is in the Black community. So let's listen to what she has to say, and then we are going to go from there.
How do Black women benefit from being in community with Black men? Not romantically, not familially, communally. Now, let's start this conversation with a working definition of community, okay? When I say community, I'm talking about a shared space, physical, emotional, or digital.
I'm also going to say this too. This question to me is also an indication of how many Black women grew up without fathers. It's just a clear indication. Because if you have to ask this, if this is like a theory up for debate, that likely means that you're not in community with them. You're not. Or you don't know them like that. Maybe you've seen them. Maybe you kind of had to work alongside one randomly at your job, or you saw one in class. But if you're asking me this, you're already telling me what time it is. You did not grow up in a community with Black men. Maybe you had a random brother. Maybe you had a cousin, maybe you had an uncle, but you definitely grew up like under matriarchy or a gynocracy. That to me seems so clear.
Where there's supposed to be mutual care, support, and accountability. A space where people show up for one another, not because they're obligated to by blood or romance, but because they value humanity. Now, we know that Black men love to try to keep Black women accountable. But where's the support? Where's the mutual care? And then the thing is, like, if the community doesn't exist, if there's no real benefit and there's no real sense of community, how can you hold me accountable? Now, so we have...
No, she asked, like, if there is not a community, then how can you hold me accountable? That's actually a very good point. If you are saying you're not a part of my community, if you were saying Black woman only, right? Because like, you have some pages out there where it's like, oh, I'm pro-Black woman. They make it very clear, I'm pro-Black, but only for women. You've had decades upon decades upon decades of policies that have specifically benefited Black women. Dr. Tizon Johnson breaks this down exclusively in his book. For those of you guys who think that this is all a joke, when you actually look at the data and you understand the amount of programs that have been made available or were made available to women, and specifically Black women, that were completely null and void, that were non-existent for Black men, you will be shocked. These aren't just ideas. These aren't just like dusty Black men who are just complaining because they couldn't get a job or whatever. It's like there were actual policies and there was systematic assistance that women really have had for decades. And actually, a lot of men wouldn't even be mad about that if that didn't become a reason for Black women to kind of go and like basically undermine men or talk about men and bash men and say like, well, you guys are on our level. You get access to some programs, you get the job, you get the grant, you get the internship, you get the money, whatever. And then you look at the men who don't have access to those things, who are taking a little longer to move forward, and you're saying, oh, we're not on our level. That is the kind of culture that has been actually cultivated over the last few decades. And what's happening now is because those programs are being removed and the access that women and also Black women have enjoyed for quite some time is not there, it's forcing these women back into a stark reality that Black men have been accustomed to because that's their thing. But then it's forcing these kinds of conversations to the table. Well, what does it mean to be in community with Black men? You're only asking that because you weren't in community with Black men beforehand and you were comfortable without them until you needed them. Let's continue.
Working definition. How do Black women actually benefit from being in community with Black men? Not hypothetically, not ideally, but in practice, in real life. I've been sitting with this question because over the past few months, I've had to ask for help repeatedly, publicly, and overwhelmingly, it's been Black women who responded. Black women who gave, Black women who checked in, Black women who shared the posts, dropped comments of support, offered resources, and poured from their already empty cups. Black women. And I'm talking about hundreds, thousands of dollars, right, that I've been able to raise because of the generosity of Black women.
Dang. I mean, I don't know. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. Can y'all tell me an example of a Black man who went online saying I need some help and he got hundreds of thousands of dollars? Because in my opinion, if a Black man goes online and says I need help, they're going to look at him and say, Negro, get a job. You're an able-bodied man. Get off of TikTok and get you a real job. But here's an able-bodied Black woman who went online, it sounds like, and said she needed help, and she got support. On that end, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying here we're looking at a prime example of how Black men and Black men are not treated equal. Because best believe if a Black man went online and was like, oh, help me, they'll be like, Negro, can you get you a real job? Black men and Black women would sit there and say that. Be like, we talk about you're a man, you don't need a handout. And Black women will look at him and say the same thing, like, you're a man, figure it out. But if it's a Black woman that's like, oh, I'm gonna show you support, what you talking about? Already she said that. I'm like, you done got hundreds of thousands of dollars by going online, and wow, I mean, good for her. I'm not mad at it, but I'm just like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Okay, let's continue.
Because of the time, the energy, the emotional labor, the contributions from Black women. There's been one Black man in the last 3 months who has sent me $25. He happens to be one of my mutuals on this app. He's also married to a white woman, and I think that's worth mentioning, right? So, again, the question is, what does communal support from Black men actually look like? Where is it? When Black women are in need, when we are grieving, when we are creating, when we are fighting for our lives, how do Black men show up in ways that don't center themselves? Because what I see too often is critique without care. I see the accountability, right? They want us to be accountable. But where's the care? I see the demands without contributions, entitlement without reciprocity. And what's worse, when Black women do name these gaps, we get labeled bitter, divisive, ungrateful. But my question is rooted in data, in lived experience, in absence. So I'm asking seriously, not sarcastically, what is the communal value of Black men in the lives of Black women? What do we gain? What is the mutuality? What is the investment? Because Black women stay showing up for everybody, but who's showing up for us?
Something else she mentioned, she talked about basically she was in need and she got a whole bunch of different support from Black women. There was one Black man who was married to a snow bunny who showed up for her. The rest were Black women. Then she goes on to ask, what value, what benefit do we have from Black men when we're in need, when we need help, we're grieving? How do they show up outside of centering themselves, right? So my other response to that is whoever you're in community with is going to be the ones who support you. So if you are in a community of primarily women, which it sounds like she is, because the fact that she's asking this tells me that she doesn't know Black men. If you're in community with Black women, it makes sense that Black women would be the ones to show up for you when you are in need. So like, it's not surprising to me that a Black woman who's in community with Black women who is probably a feminist, definitely sounds like she has feminist thought. It's not surprising to me that she would share a post. Other Black women who are likely feminists share the post, and those Black feminists, those Black women support each other. Like, no, that makes sense. But to expect Black men who you probably don't know, are not in community with, don't probably respect, and don't like to show up for you when they don't see you, don't have a relationship with you, doesn't sound like you're really interested in them. They're supposed to now just all of a sudden just be there and support and like give you a hand. Like it doesn't really make sense because you're not in community with them. So this idea of you don't like Black men, you're not in community with them, you don't really want to be in community with them, and then when you have a hard time, random Black men are supposed to just come out of nowhere and give you money and there's supposed to be this sense of community. Like, no, community is cultivated ongoingly. And I think what happens is, I think sometimes Black women don't understand the part that they play in that. Like, a community is something that is cultivated between men and women, but that happens on a day-to-day thing. So if you center your life around Black women exclusively and you haven't learned how to get along and have healthy, interdependent connections with Black men, then you can't be surprised when they don't show up for you because they've never been there. Because you've never been around them, you've never been in those spaces where they would be there to help. So me as a Black woman, married to a Black man, I don't have those issues. There are Black men in my life that are helpful, great, that I have working relationships with that have been there for me and would be there for me. So I'm not asking this question, but I'm in community with them. But if I wasn't, if I was single and if I just had a whole bunch of different girlfriends, it would likely be different. So I think on a real practical level, community is something that needs to be cultivated over time. It's not just there like randomly when you need money because you got laid off and there's supposed to be community. Like if you're not investing in the community, then we can't be surprised that when the community doesn't invest back, they don't know who you are. And I think that's sometimes the missing piece. Really interesting conversation, but I'm curious, what do you guys think about this whole thing? Did you have anything else you want to add? Or is there something that I missed? Let me know down in the comment section. Thank you so much for listening if you've gotten this far, and we'll talk later. Bye.